Welcome to the Table podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we give you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the table. Today, I am thrilled to be joined with Saul Malek, a professional speaker who has become, in his own words, America's emerging voice on the modern gambling landscape. Saul developed a gambling addiction as a college sophomore, losing money, time, relationships, and nearly his life. Since entering recovery in 2019, he's become an in-demand speaker for schools, colleges, athlete mental health organizations, and suicide prevention groups. His story has been featured in the New York Times, NPR, PBS NewsHour, and the Dallas Morning News. He's appeared on Dr. Phil Primetime, delivered a TEDx talk at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and keynoted major conferences on problem gambling and mental health across the country. Saul's message is simple but very powerful. He's not anti-gambling, he's pro-education. Saul, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to the table. How are you today?
I'm doing better now that I have a seat at the table. Thank you. Thank you for having me on today. It's nice
That was
to
a
be
good
here.
one. I like that. You have been busy. And you have not been on this earth very long. So you've done a lot of things in a short period of time,
Oh,
which is pretty impressive.
well, thank you. I think it's a testament to, of course, the work I've been putting in. I don't want to undermine that, but I think it also speaks to just how prevalent and prominent gambling has become. I was even wondering, hey, are we going to be sponsored by a sports?
DraftKings.
Yeah, you never know. So.
As someone who, I enjoy sports a lot and I have seen this kind of rise in gambling, but funny enough, I did not make the connection in thinking about how this is affecting our youth and adolescents and particularly, high school students and probably even younger. I mean, I don't know, what the statistics say about when, students kind of start this gambling, but you can escape it. It's everywhere. It's on ads, it's on commercials. I mean, it's on social media. You're bombarded with it, with ads all the time, and so tempting. Like they give you credits and do all these things. And so, love for us to just kind of talk about your story. And let's start by just taking us back to the beginning. I mean, you were a college sophomore, and by all appearances, a normal student, right? What did your relationship with gambling look like in those early days? And when did you first realize that, oof, I might have a problem?
So my first introduction to real, like actual sports betting on a game was when I was 19. So I was a sophomore in college. It was
Okay.
2017. And the way it started, Bridget, was sort of a natural extension of what I had already been involved in with fantasy baseball leagues with friends growing up. So
Okay.
it was an acquaintance I had who I'd done these different fantasy leagues with before. He said, hey, I have a bookie, someone who
Oh
facilitates
gosh! Wow!
bets.
Wow! You had a bookie? Okay, go ahead.
Well, he had a bookie, when you picture what a bookie is, it's, in this case, it wasn't like some mobster, some kid in college who can make you an account somewhere. It was that sort of thing.
Gotcha. That's
So
that's what I think. I'm a little bit older, so I'm like, he's
sure.
got some guy in the dark corner smoking
Right,
a
yeah,
cigar.
not that eerie in modern times, but he had this bookie and he said, hey, do you want to do a little sports betting? And I was a bit skeptical. I was 19 years old, didn't really have an income at that time, but I looked at the games that night and said, hey, I see a baseball game that I'm pretty confident on the result.
Okay.
Why not bet $10? That was it.
Okay.
$10 bet. No big deal. And I guess I would say when that first bet was successful, it was whatever, a $10 win, but really it felt like winning $1 million
Yeah.
because addition new money coming in very quickly, which I could sense, this is an alternative. Even then I could think, oh wait, all you have to do is like send in your bet and then you make this money and then that's all it is.
Yeah.
But also it was the idea that I'm a real winner. I feel internally that I'm
Interesting.
successful.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big deal because I felt that in my fraternity and in, certain situations, I didn't feel I necessarily measured up. I wasn't an in crowd and I could see, I had this first
Yeah.
bet. And so it was really the perfect storm that first bet created, where I also thought, well, if I can do it once, surely this can happen again and I can
Mm-hmm.
really be successful at this. And so that's what started my embarking on this journey of dabbling in a little, here's a football game I'm going to bet a little amount on and,
Yep.
increase very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the time that really sticks out to me was when this bookie, maybe a month or so into this experience, said, you know what, instead of just texting me what bet you want,
Yep.
I'll make you an account through this portal and
Mm-hmm.
you'll have a line of credit and
Mm.
you can bet whenever you want. And at the end of the week, we'll just square up
Settle up.
through
Mm-hmm.
the way we've been doing. And I would say that is what opened my eyes to the fact that there was all sorts of tennis matches or different things that were beyond what I knew existed. And my thought wasn't, well, let me just stick to what I know. It was, wow, this feels really good. And I'm
Mm.
making money doing this for the most part. Why not venture into, tennis or whatever else?
Yep.
And I also, I was increasing the frequency in which I was gambling, increasing the amount of money in which I was gambling, and hiding it from my parents because my mom had seen that I was putting some money in my bank account, asked what it was. And when I told her I was doing some sports betting, I was cautioned not to.
Mm.
And I said, okay, I'm going to stop. And so I just stopped showing her. I would keep the
Hide it.
money in my,
Put it other
yeah,
places. Yeah.
yeah, right. So she wouldn't see it in my Wells Fargo bank account. But anyway, not to be too long-winded here. I know you'd asked, well, how do I see that it's becoming a problem?
Yeah.
But
Good.
when I really noticed this was becoming a problem, I would say when I first had to go to my parents for a bailout where I had to expose what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of my sophomore year, when I was running low on money, my parents would give me some money for school, and I'd said,
Sure.
"Hey, need more money." And my mom was asking, "Well, why is it that you keep needing more money?" And I'd say, "Well, I have fraternity dues, or I have to do something for this group I'm a part of," not telling the truth.
Yep.
And when I went back home that summer, that was when I was confronted with having to admit, "Oh, well, I need more money, and this is what's
This
happening."
is why. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And my parents bailed me out at first. They didn't want me to owe money to some sketchy character.
Sure.
And then when I paid the guy off, and he said, "Okay, well, here's credit." Of course, the credit recycled for the next week. And I thought, well, there's no way I could possibly lose again. And sure enough, I did. And when my parents were approached about that, then that was when they said, "Hey, you need to go to get help.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to school. We found this group. It's called Gamblers Anonymous.
Yep.
And we think that that's something you should do." So anyway, all that to say, that was the first inclination that maybe this had escaped me a little bit. But I don't believe I saw it as something I wanted to stop at that
Mm.
point. I thought, well, if I just
If I
control
win one more
or
time, or
win, yeah, or if I moderate it, or if I'm able to just do better. I was thinking, well, it was because I picked this, that's why I lost.
yeah, rationalizing the. So how? Okay, if I don't mind me asking, like, how much had you lost by the summer of your sophomore year? How much had your parents had to bail you out?
I would say at that point, so going into my junior year, couple thousand, maybe
Okay.
2,500, maybe
Okay.
three or so. I mean, by the end of the whole journey, I was down, I'd say between 20 and 25K.
Yeah.
And so this was really, I'd say my junior year of college, like when I went back to school,
Mm-hmm.
2018 to 2019 was just the absolute destruction of
Mm.
this whole thing.
Gotcha.
And I'm trying to do a better job of showing the listener how this really came together, because
Yeah.
on the one hand, I don't want to go into every little thing and drag this on when we have a lot to talk about. But at the same time, I think, it's warrants a little more depth. Like,
No,
well,
absolutely.
yeah, how
Especially because
happened?
in some ways, on the surface, it appears like you caught it early, right? Your parents like, oh, this is not a good idea.
Sure.
Let's get you into Gamblers Anonymous. But it seems like even after that, it went worse.
Oh, it got worse. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. I think that whoever's listening here,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of school admin, the thing about this is it's a very subtle and very progressive illness when you talk about gambling as an
Uh-huh.
addiction.
Yep.
And especially with the online accessibility where it speeds up that whole process. Of course, it's 24/7 in terms of being able to access it.
Access. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and so I think that I can look back on it now and seem pretty lucid about how
Sure.
I progressed, and then I bet on this, and then I chased that thrill. But really living in the moment of it, there is no sense of rational thinking. And I've described it before. If you're with a dog and you place a steak in front of the dog, the dog is not going to ask you, is that from Whole Foods? How's it
Right.
cooked?
Or is that for me?
Yeah, right. It's not going to sit around and say, oh, is someone going to be upset if I eat this because it was
Right.
supposed to be for someone else? They're just going to eat it.
Yeah.
And, with no real second thought. And so when I say it's like being a rabid dog in front of a piece of meat, is saying, well, that next bet is producing this high for me. And in addition, as I'm building up this relationship with gambling that I described early on was very casual, $10, it was a hobby, but it
Yep.
was something I started to include my roommates on, where we'd get some beers. I mean, I guess we were underage, but
Yeah.
hopefully the
In
statute
college. Yeah.
is over. Yeah, so we'd have some
It
beers there.
happens.
Yeah, right. Probably the least of my issues then.
Yeah, that part.
But we would watch some sports together, and I'd say, hey, bet on this tennis match. And I even recall now, as I look back to some of these early memories where I first started to get into things like tennis betting that was around my friends, is that this dream world I was already building of wanting people to associate me with gambling and my knowledge of sports. I would pick absolute random tennis players to win, hoping if they win, then all my buddies will say, oh my God, he knows so
Yeah.
much about these random tennis matches, even though, and then when I'd lose, it would be like, oh, it was unlucky, or find a way to justify
Yeah.
it. So I see it as something that became an identity,
Sure.
part of an identity. It became something that boosted my self-esteem and the belief that I could use this as a way to financially support myself, because I was someone who struggled with, I know a lot of kids do, the ability to sit down and just focus. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had ADHD clinically diagnosed for a while. I used to think that was just something made up for my laziness, but I realized whatever I have, whatever's chemically going on in my mind, it's always, and I say always, it really always has been a struggle to see through some sort of job or internship or
Yeah.
whatever. They will crap. I just take my phone out and I can 30 times what I would make working at some library or something over
Right.
this. So anyway, this is why I'm saying this journey of how it escalated, I would say, is not a reflection of stupidity, but
No.
more a reflection of the draw, the pull. And of course I'm taking ownership, but I can see how attractive it is for
Absolutely.
student body that these professionals on listening work
Yeah.
with.
So, all
Very
right. So you started to talk about you went to Gamblers Anonymous. You came back for your junior year. Talk about what happened junior year.
Yeah, so I as I recall it, I went to my first GA meeting, Gamblers Anonymous. This was August 25th, 2018. So
Okay.
this was Saturday morning in San Antonio, where I was in college at Trinity University. And the very first meeting, and I mention this because it's important to me, because there is often a disconnect in young people in GA that I've
Yep.
found, is I was in this meeting with these people in their 50s or
Yeah.
60s.
Older.
Yeah, they're talking about going to horse racing or casinos,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking, what does any of this have to
To
do
do with
with?
me or what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
yeah, right. I have not lost
Yeah.
a marriage or anything. I don't even really have an income, and so it didn't really stick with
Got
me.
it.
That first point, I remember I went maybe a week without a bet just to maybe appease my parents or something, and then I celebrated maybe a week of abstinence with putting money in on. I was able to also deposit on certain websites if I had
Okay.
money at the time, and so I deposited on a website a little bit of money to do a bet on a tennis match.
Okay.
I remember that being like, oh, I'm back into it. Um, a lot of that junior year is blurry in terms of the chronology of which
Okay.
bookie was when, because what happened was when my parents didn't bail me out of that first bookie right before I went back to school, I I ended up blocking the guy's phone number and just
Oh,
using
geez.
contacts I
Okay.
had from independent school, from St.
Mm-hmm.
John's,
Mm-hmm.
guys who are in different colleges who were like, "Oh, I'm in a fraternity here." I figured I could find another bookie pretty easily. And so
Yep.
that's really the process that took me down such a deep rabbit hole my junior year was bookie after bookie after bookie, and I'd block him and I'd lose here. And then I would get calls from someone saying, "Hey, this is so and so. I help this person with his sports book and you haven't paid. You need to pay us." And, I'd block this.
Yeah. Move on to the next
Overwhelming
one.
thing. Yeah, and it was pretty much in Gamblers Anonymous, the gambler, the addicted gambler is described as having a gambling career. It's described as a career, and I think, well, that's very accurate because this was taking up more of my time than my studies. I mean, I was
Yeah.
in college to get a degree, and instead
Yeah.
it was a whole process. People talk about, well, it takes 2 seconds to click submit and place a bet, but the whole day is spent
Yeah,
planning.
and then you gotta watch the results, and you gotta see
Yeah,
what happens. Like, that's
exactly.
just the
Right.
first part.
Right. So I'm checking the score. I'm losing sleep too because I would wake up very early because there would be overseas baseball
Sure.
games.
Oh,
And,
jeez. Yeah.
I guess what I would say to really characterize this junior year of college that I had was um, to say it was frightening, I think was an understatement
Mm,
as it built, as it progressed even further, because at this point I'm hiding so much from my girlfriend at the time, who knew to an extent that I was gambling, that I was going
right.
to GA, but didn't know when I would relapse. I say relapse, I was never really clean for any extended
Yeah.
period of time. So I was really just stuck in my addiction.
Mhm.
I'm hiding all this. I'm hiding from my parents. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, no, this bookie going to come after me. And um, I recall, how it affected the family. And something I think about is how my parents had planned for a long time to go on this trip to Morocco. They
Mhm.
were really looking forward to going. And then with one of my really awful um, gambling escapades, I owed money to someone that was at my school, and I felt I had to get my parents involved. And then they had to cancel their entire trip.
Oh,
They're afraid of, well, if we leave and he's back in the U.S., destroying himself with his gambling, he's in danger. We're like, we can't leave if something happens. And
yeah.
so I was just thinking, that stands out to me as sort of one of the scenarios that paints the picture of how this behavior was not only, of course, destroying my life, but it was taxing the people around me. And
Absolutely.
I say that really compounds the destruction when someone looks at a gambling addiction and the negative effects it has on a person in the family. It's like, well, now I'm such a failure. I'm destroying my family.
Mhm.
And yet, while aware consciously of the fact that this was so harmful,
Still couldn't.
well, not enough to get me to stop.
Yeah.
And I would read articles sometimes, like here's an article of a guy who took his own life because of his gambling addiction. You read that, and then by the afternoon, back gambling again on some credit on some
Well, it
sports.
is an addiction, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
right. There's no amount of knowledge, I would say, that gets a person to stop it. And so I'm hoping I'm putting some sort of order to this, but
yeah. No, this is
yeah,
great.
yeah.
So,
How
you talk about you losing time, money, and strain on relationships, and you said you nearly lost your life. Can you talk about how dark it got, and what was the turning point that led you to recovery?
Sure. Yeah, so, I recall, so there's an old timer, and plenty of old timers. There was one old timer in particular in Gamblers Anonymous, guy named Bill,
Mhm.
and he was in the Houston GA program, and someone that I had met when I was first, I guess when I was newly introduced to GA. I started in San Antonio, and then when I went back home to see my parents over winter break, so the end of 2018, that was
Mhm.
when I got acquainted to this Houston group. But
Okay.
in any case, this guy had told a story about how he had made a suicide attempts as a
Mm.
result of his gambling. And when I think about how fear-stricken and panicked I was when I was back home visiting my parents at some point, I guess it was over the summer in 2019.
Mhm.
And I just remember just this itchy, anxious, awful feeling
Mm.
inside. all that to say that when I talked to this man from the program, I had said, "Hey, I remember you sharing about, making these suicide attempts, and I'm curious, what do you think is the least painful way to commit suicide?
Oh, wow.
What would be the easiest way where it's not messy, painful, whatever?" And his response, this was, I'd say, in June of 2019. He said, "Well, that they all hurt the same. They all take away your opportunity to fix this." And he's called for an immediate meeting with me, my parents, and another member of the program over at one of the churches in Houston where they host the meetings.
Mhm.
And this was like a real hardcore intervention moment where he was describing to my parents phone call we'd had and how significant this was, and how he was even giving some education of how gambling addiction has such a high rate of suicide. And even beyond that, I still gambled for a few more
Wow.
weeks or a month or so. But I do recall that almost primal animalistic feeling of panic and fear of, and I apologize because I feel I don't even do it justice of what that feels like trying to describe it. It's
Mhm.
almost out of body sort
Hmm.
of discomfort. I don't even feel human because I'm carrying the weight of so much.
Wow.
Not to mention, there's no free moment in my day that is not ruled by this compulsion.
Right.
I'm thinking constantly, even if it's subconscious, like I have to place the next bet, I have to get the fix. And I'm not even gambling to feel like the big shot or anything at this point. I'm doing it because it's like I have to. It is a compulsion. It's, you have, a person has to do it.
Yeah.
But all that, yeah, I mean, really the turning point though for me was, well, I got clean. So I say my last bet, my GA last bet date, I say July 18th, 2019.
Okay.
Really, my last financial bet, sports bet, was a tennis match that was on July 12th. I placed a live bet. It was Jason Jung against Thanasis Kokonakis in the
Wow.
Winnett Challenger, which I think is in Illinois. So if anyone wants to verify that, you can look that. But it was a live bet for like $1.50 that I had left in credit, and I lost
Mhm.
that. And then the next day, I recall I was working as a waiter back in Houston at the time, and
Yep.
I had some cash from a tip where I was buying scratch off lottery tickets, and I
Mm.
lost that. And that was my real last bet. But for the next few days, I was going on the website where I was supposed to, or where I had the credit, where I was betting,
Yep.
and I was typing in random numbers into the account to try to click submit, like bet $1,000, hoping the website would glitch and give me these bets, even though I had no credit left. And so that was why I say my date is a few days after, because I was like, I was really trying to place bets then. So,
Mhm.
but that was I stopped really there because I didn't have any more credit anywhere. I wasn't able to get on another book. It was actually the month after, in August, where my girlfriend broke up with me over the phone because she had heard from some friends of some things I'd been hiding from her.
Mm.
And it said that, "Oh, you're such a liar." That was the last thing she said on the phone, was, "Why are you such a liar?" And hadn't talked to her since. It was like that was it.
Yeah.
And that night, I was actually going to a GA meeting to celebrate my 30 days because I was still saying my date at the time was July 14th. Like I hadn't changed it to reflect that I'd tried to gamble after
Yeah.
that. And so this was on August 14th. So I was there to celebrate my 1 month. It was supposed to be a nice evening.
Mhm.
I'd got the call. I'd been dumped like on the way to the
Uh,
meeting. And that night, that was really the turning point. Was I showed up to the meeting drunk, like I'd stopped to get a 40 and a Four Loco, and I was, I don't think I was able to finish both of them. It's a lot of alcohol, but I was
that is a
definitely
lot of
intoxicated.
alcohol.
Yeah, it's for sure a lot. Um, but I mean, so much detail. But I showed up there, and my sponsor, who was this old guy, Bill, from the meeting, kind of chewed me out for showing up like that. And I'd asked him, this is where it changed. I'd asked him, I said, "Hey, if I can go 6 months without placing a bet, just some sort of time,
Yep.
will you tell this girl that I've changed and that she should get back with me?"
Yeah.
And he had said, "Well, no." No, you have no chance at any sort of long-term sobriety or anything if you don't take this program seriously, if you don't take the 12-step program seriously. So
Mm-hmm.
what I need you to do, go to a meeting tomorrow, call me, call this other person. Like, let's actually get serious about this, because otherwise you have no real chance. And this is life or death
Yeah.
territory where you are right now, as I had proven already. So that, I would say, was the first, the real start to this was like a last ditch effort to try to get control over this relationship, get this girl to see I'd changed. I don't think it was for the right reasons. It was like I wanted to be the center of attention again. Look at me, look how much I've changed. But then I
Yeah.
realized things were getting better. It was like, hey, I still want to pursue this for my own well-being.
So what did recovery actually look like? So you had that meeting. It was supposed to be your 1 month, technically not your 1 month
Yeah.
anniversary, and you're feeling pretty low, but clearly you were on the road to recovery then and didn't kind of go back. So how did that? What changed in your mind? What did you start to do differently? How did you kind of get to the next level, to the next step?
Yeah, I would say it's been consistently being a part of and working in the Gamblers Anonymous group. What it entails, working the 12-step program. There are 12 steps
Yep.
of getting back, not even getting back, I would say, really recovering to a new, better way of living, where gambling does not need to serve as an outlet to provide self-esteem, comfort, or anything. And so I guess I'd say it's been a slow, consistent effort that
Mhm.
has involved a lot of writing, a lot of calling with other members, attending meetings. And through this process, I would say it has not only helped me to identify the, I guess, dead end nature of my gambling, that, hey, it's not going to end differently.
Right.
I conceding internally that this can only end in destruction, right?
Mhm.
This will only bring me to destruction. And so from there, building up a way of life where I, have a strong support network, I have things to fall back on, where I don't have to or choose to go back
To
to it. And I
go
will
back,
say,
yeah.
I've in recent years been a lot more of a sports fan again, and I'm
Mm,
I'm thinking that that's something to always be careful about, of like, how much do I really care about sports? I certainly care about the Houston sports teams because I'm from
sure.
Houston, but being mindful, like, I'm not doing any fantasy leagues, I'm not
Gotcha.
doing March Madness brackets or anything. But
Mhm.
I'm gonna say, I think also what's helpful for me, and I'm sure it's not the case for every person, but having the good fortune of a supportive family, of having a college degree, not only that, but connections and things, to where I feel that gambling isn't the only thing that can save me or keep me stable in this world. And I don't know that every person has that
Right.
privilege. I mean, I'm sure
Absolutely.
there are a lot of people, yeah, I've heard in meetings, it's like they go home, they're alone in some dingy apartment somewhere. And it's like, well, that might be the only thing bringing them pleasure. So I can see why it would be difficult to give it up and stay
S
giving it up.
Yeah. So what made you decide you wanted to go public and start doing this work?
So, I was gonna say it's random, but I don't know that anything really is random. I could say things are God incidences, not
Yeah. Mhm.
coincidences. I'm
I'm with
speaking
you
like,
on that for sure.
yeah, I'm speaking like an old 80-year-old in an AA meeting or something. But, yeah, I'd say what happened was, well, so I graduated. I did end up graduating, which was a point of contention, that should I go back for my senior year, because I
Mm,
was just now getting clean from the
yeah.
gambling. But I did go back. I got my degree in 2020. Yeah, 2020 was when I graduated. And I had the idea to go to graduate school to get a degree in mental health counseling.
Mhm.
And part of my interest in that, to be an addictions counselor, was, hey, let me go back to my high school and deliver a message about gambling, sports betting, because at this time, it was around 2022, I saw, hey, there's a need to talk about this. This
Yeah.
stuff was just getting
Just getting
started.
started, yeah.
It's really just taken off. And I was given the opportunity to do that. I mean, it wasn't anything I got paid to do at the
Sure.
time or anything. It
Yeah.
was just him just, showing up.
Mhm.
And someone had told me, they'd given me the idea after, hey, well, this is something that you could do as some sort of a career. And so I thought, oh, that'd be interesting. Started sending out some emails to the schools in that same conference. And I got one school that was willing to have me come in, even
Mhm.
without a website or anything, just a
Yeah.
cold Gmail email. And, that started it there. So I think it really started from just a genuine interest in seeing a need for it. And then um, there was also, I had a connection in recovery who had been asked by the New York Times if he had known any younger gamblers that might be willing to talk on this New York Times article. And so I had that media privilege as well. And so I was able to kind of build from that, build a website that showed I'd been featured here, I'd spoken here, I'd gathered
Mhm.
some testimonials, I'd reached out to some other places that also, had given me a early platform
Yep.
starting it out. So that really got it started. And then I didn't end up really enjoying the counseling program. I did not end up finishing that degree,
Okay.
and the speaking had been building to where, so 2024, I was working part-time as a speaker and part-time as a chauffeur when I was living in Dallas, like, black car service and
Uh-huh.
driving people in suits and stuff. And then 2025 and now this year has been my full-time occupation is Saul Malek Speaking LLC. And I'm
Nice.
hoping to continue this as long as it allows me to.
That's great. And so, one of the things that I wanted to touch on that you said a couple of minutes ago is about when you first went to GA and how it was people in there who were betting on horses and in casinos and that sort of thing. I hope that now that it's taken on a different kind of life or angle that GA has shifted, and that there is real support for folks out there who just like you didn't feel a connection to that sort of gambling. Can you speak to that a little bit?
It's a great point. The first thing I'd say is I found that the problem was with me, not the
Mm,
program, even in
that's
the
fair.
beginning. Like being young and saying, I think it is a real quandary to say, well, I'm around people I don't really relate to. But in desperation, like the program itself, I say is separate from who's sitting in the room. And that actually is a principle of GA, Gamblers
That's fair.
Anonymous. They say, yeah, the principles before the personalities of the meeting. But I get it, like, especially in early sobriety, I guess I'd call it, is you want to be around people that can connect. And so it was difficult, but I'd say still doable. And like I
Yep.
eventually was able to work in the program, even at a young age when I got clean. But I do notice now that I'm 28, I'm
Mhm.
not the youngest person in these rooms.
No.
Usually there's actually maybe like 4 or 5 guys that come in that are younger than I am now.
Yeah.
And so I'd say I've noticed this shift, especially really like in the last
Mhm.
years,
Yeah.
year and a
No,
half or
that's
so,
fair.
is that a lot of young online gamblers, sports bettors. There was, I'm hearing too of young people, mainly young guys, who are involved in cryptocurrency,
Oh,
to where it's an addiction, trading cryptocurrencies or
interesting.
using prediction markets and things. And so, with the emerging landscape, seen a lot more young participation. In fact, I want to say I've heard there are some online meetings for
Okay.
younger audiences as
Okay.
well,
Great.
which I don't know how effective that is. You have a bunch of people that are all like 20 that are all starting at the same time. Like, I don't know who's the voice of wisdom in that room, but
Yeah.
at least they're,
They're
all
talking about
they're
the
talking.
issue
Yeah.
at hand. So,
Yeah.
you mentioned sports betting has exploded since it was legalized federally in 2018, and you've talked and written about the way, colleges have been directly involved in this promotion, which I think is crazy, but that's another whole conversation in itself. So, what is happening on college campuses right now, and why should student affairs professionals be alarmed?
So, gambling on college campuses has been a growing topic of concern, especially in certain demographics.
Sure.
So, athletics is a big issue course, because of the mental health component of it, but also because of the regulations of NCAA
Hmm.
athletes who are not permitted to be engaging in this activity. And then
Right.
we're seeing all these violations and things. The other area is fraternities, where I'm fortunate
Oh,
now. I'm getting
interesting. Yeah,
more,
didn't think
yeah,
about
more
that.
work in fraternities. In fact, I was just at San Diego State University
Hmm.
delivering a program to their interfraternity council, and even just asking them anecdotally, like, "Hey, you guys seeing this? You seeing this online?" Whatever. It's
Yeah.
like they're all saying, "Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's."
absolutely.
And what's really interesting to me about the student life and being on campus is that I think universities can at least play dumb to that issue, or they can act as if, well, we're not seeing it. We can go into a fraternity house and see a bong and, 20 beer bottles, and we can make a statement on that. But there's so much less outward urgency, I would say. I'd say a campus can easily say, well, we're not seeing it.
Right.
Well, what are you expecting to see? There's not going to be like the Sands Casino in the middle of,
In the
well,
lobby.
so yeah, I mean, it's going to be taking place online, or people playing poker in a frat house. I mean, that's seen as pretty normal behavior. And I think that's part of why for student affairs people should be so concerned, is that there is still, I believe, the perception that this is a lesser of the vices that young
Right,
people
that
engage
could
in.
properly
Yeah.
could have at this age. So,
Have you ever
um,
been to, like, a charity raffle or, like, a bingo?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's what everyone has, and so you say, "Hey,
exactly.
we eliminate playing bingo with seniors or something as, like, one of our excursions." Well, like, what's are we the fun police now? And so I think people need to see it as more of a real health crisis and less of trying to interfere in someone's social life.
Well, sure, because I mean the accessibility now has changed the nature of the addiction and speed at which people can get addicted. So that's one thing, and it's you don't have to physically go anywhere anymore, right? And so that's the
Right.
other thing.
Yeah.
So definitely, you absolutely need to be thinking about how this affects students not just college campuses. So we're going to kind of jump into the K-12 world
Oh,
because
yeah.
you're doing
Sure.
some work there, and so because you got boarding schools, residential,
Yeah.
but even, kids in day schools who have a lot of autonomy or access to funds can quickly become addicted. So it's important to get this word out. So question for you is like, at what age now do you think, like how early are kids being exposed to gambling behaviors? And what does that tell you or the research tell us about early exposure and long-term risk?
So I know the NCPG, the National Council on Problem Gambling, had put out a statement about a survey. 60 to 80% of high school students had gambled in the past year, gambled for money.
Wow.
And it's a wide range. And admittedly, I'm not entirely certain on, well, what is the criteria for, um, you know, what do they consider gambling? But
Mhm.
I at least I think should give a snapshot of this is widely being accessed. This sort of activity is
Yep.
being accessed. This being sports betting and card playing and things like that. But I'm seeing it now more commonly in middle schools. I'm really seeing middle
Wow.
school, and when I say it, like I'd say it's kind of a more innocuous looking version of gambling, where
Okay.
students are video gaming, and in the Roblox game, to unlock a rare item, the user is spending real money to open up something of an unknown value inside, right? And so
Interesting.
say, well, that is gambling, but maybe legally speaking, it isn't. And, if the parents don't care or think it is or see the harm in it, well, then they're paying money to have the kids because like my parents would buy me the NBA Live 2003.
Sure.
Like, yeah, I'm playing a video game. And I even recall when I first got involved in daily fantasy sports in high school, like a daily lineup through DraftKings was what I
Mhm.
was. I remember like, hey mom, I did really well in this test, and I'm there's this app it's like a fantasy league, but we can put in some money. Can I have $20 to do it? And if you're able to explain it in a way that seems innocent enough, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's like, we're buying you another video game. And so I think that's the problem. I'll say real quick too, I had a conversation with a friend who we were talking about sort of the paradox of like, well, you have a speaking business on gambling addiction.
Yep.
So in a way, don't you want there to be gambling problems out there? Because otherwise,
No.
well, well, their argument was, well, even if all this legalization, everything goes away, there will still be gambling problems out there. But my argument was it's not the problem that drives the business, it's the perception of the problem.
Mm.
And so my fear is, I guess this is a real fear, is if gambling starts to get, like sports betting gets outlawed more frequently,
Uh-huh.
more readily, that the harm will still exist. But the perception from the public will be, well, now this is illegal, so now there is no
So
harm.
no
So now
one's doing it,
there's
right?
no prevention or anything. And I mean, I can always go hustle for another job or something, I'm sure. But I do worry for those who need services that, I think people only react to it if it's in their faces and everything. If you take it away, it's still a problem, but people are not so likely to consider it a problem warranting any sort of intervention.
Yeah. So with that said, like how, yeah, and your work with schools, both, K-12 and colleges and universities, how aware are people about the gambling as a student wellness issue? And where do you think it falls on their radar relative to alcohol, drugs, and just mental health in general?
This is an interesting one because I am noticing it more frequently now, where
Okay.
I wonder though if it's being seen as just a trendy thing, like a trendy offshoot where we're going to talk about this for the next 2 to 5 years and then, move on to the next thing. I think there's still a lot of, there's a large knowledge gap of
Hmm.
what goes on in the mind of the compulsive gambler, like, and where does this measure up with other things? I still think a lot see it as a mental health issue, but not one that is as much an issue of suicide prevention or, to the same degree as drugs or alcohol. So I think it's starting to get there, but I
Okay.
think there's still some misunderstandings about it. But it's
Gotcha.
just a very strange concept of willingly throwing away money, throwing away time and all that for something where you're really getting nothing in return other than whatever the quick
The
high
hope
is.
that you gonna get
Yeah, the
something in
hope. Really,
return.
I guess that is a large part of it is just
Yeah.
paying for some amount of hope and delusion and dream world. And it's very, I don't know how anyone could wrap their head around it if they're not doing it themselves because it's like none of it makes any sense. So
Yeah, that's fair. So, for all those folks who are listening out there who are working with students, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need to kind of be on the lookout for this. What are the signs that a student may be struggling with gambling, and why are they? I mean, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Why are they so easy to miss?
yeah, it's a great question. I'd say some of the signs, first of all, I would look at the lack of sleep and say if
Mm,
kids are all showing up tired, they're, not sleeping. And the reason I say that is because when I look at the online nature, and this goes in with how schools are so concerned about tech use, is like kids are not sleeping because they're on the computer, on the phone, whatever, placing bets, or they're, not sleeping restfully through the night. And
yeah,
so, of course, I could point to a number of things, but I'd say, okay, take a look at that. Of course, one of the ones that naturally would come up is if you say, hey, the kid is asking people for money, you hear that in the
sure.
hallway, but and that could be a little harder to spot
Mm-hmm.
as administrator. The other thing I'd say is if you just pick up on some of the language kids are using, and this is
Okay.
something I do hear from schools, if you hear kids talking about parlays or the odds or the over under, and you hear this in the locker rooms or in the hallways, it's like, hey, those are some kids I want to be careful of. The issue though is when you talk about, well, what is a warning sign? Well, what apps are the kids on? What are they using online? It's like, well, I don't know to what extent the school can be the digital police of what
It's
apps a
hard.
kid has on their
Yeah.
phone or iPad, but that's certainly a part of it. I mean, the depression piece goes hand in hand with it too of gambling addiction. But again, a lot of these signs could be described by other things. And so what I would say instead is use gambling screening questions in your overall health intake
Mm-hmm.
forms. So that way you can start to
Yeah, that's a good
gain
idea.
a more clear picture. Because otherwise, a lot of these things you'll just say, well, the kid is stressed in school, they're struggling here, they're whatever, and you wouldn't connect it naturally to gambling. And so I think that's why you said it's so difficult to see it. And this is the common talking point that people bring up, which is true, is you wouldn't smell someone gambling. You would
Right.
hopefully not. I don't know what that would smell like. I mean, unless you're in a nasty game room somewhere, but
Ashtray.
it wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't smell like anything. It wouldn't. You
Right.
wouldn't see someone. You get the point. And
Yeah.
so it's so easy to disguise it, to hide it. But I know a lot of schools are going phone free
Yeah.
on campuses. And I guess in that respect, the school can at least say, well, we're doing all we can. There's really at a certain point, it's like what can we do? And I think that's something that schools should also consider too, is you can educate the students, you can kind of monitor what websites they're able to access, but ultimately there's only so much you can do.
That's true, and then you talked about this earlier, kind of the secrecy and the shame, and so that can really affect someone's willingness to ask for help, right? And so
Sure.
keeping all of that in mind, how do schools approach these conversations, or what should they be saying about, this sort of addiction and how just like any other addiction can be really detrimental and let us help you.
One of the key talking points I bring up to students is to how to support a friend, how to effectively help a friend without enabling them and contributing to their destruction. And so one of those pieces I'd say is not bailing out a person who, is struggling with an addiction, just
Yeah.
not paying off their debts, not doing that. And so for that reason, I say, like, if the school's looking at a way to balance treatment with punishment,
Mm.
I believe the school should still enforce consequences on students who
Sure.
are, caught gambling or gambling even addictively. If you up the punishment or the consequence or the response, I guess I would say.
Mhm.
And so I would hope that a school could have some sort of reporting policy the same way where if you report that you notice someone who is having a problem with drugs or something, you don't face any punishment. And I'm trying not to be contradictory because I know I
No, no,
said
no.
it's important
Yes.
for the person who's addicted to really face some sort of consequence so they don't
Yep.
repeat it again. But I think in terms of encouraging someone to seek help, I think if you go out of your way to report it, then or self-report it, then you would be faced with, no or fewer consequences in the treatment
Well,
piece would
a
be.
different maybe perhaps a different consequence path,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Because, I think there is some ways to help students and still hold them accountable because I
Right,
do,
right.
think it's important to hold students accountable, but if a student is coming to you saying, "I need help," the first thing you're gonna issue is consequences. That doesn't
Right, exactly. No,
because
you're
the
right.
next student's
That's
not coming for help, right? And so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's really
Exactly.
important for schools to think about that. We've gone that path with drugs and alcohol as well. If a student comes forward and says, "I have a problem, I need help," they're not gonna say, "Okay, oh, you've been using drugs, you're suspended." No,
Right,
we're gonna
right.
get the student help, and so I would hope that schools are taking that same approach,
Sure.
with gambling. And so if a school is like, "Oh my gosh, we need to start thinking about this, um, and take this seriously," what are the first 2 or 3 things a school should do?
I think a school should first and foremost, I think they should amend what their handbook says
Mm,
to address gambling. So that way, because all future messaging, I think, should be consistent with what the school's policy actually is. Because if you issue some proclamation that students can't, whatever, they're not allowed to gamble or something,
right.
you put in the handbook, well, then I don't think that message is taken seriously. So
Sure.
I think that needs to be looked at first and foremost. I think that gambling education has a place in so much different, so many different settings.
Mhm.
There's the math component of it that you don't have in drug and alcohol use. So if you start talking about the finances, the math, all that sort of the science behind it, why you'll never win, I think those are some important ways that the conversation can happen outside of just a health class.
Sure.
Think it's important, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't turn this into a little infomercial, but I think having someone who is, more of an expert on it, who has a different perspective, who can speak to what does it mean to be a student with a gambling problem who is working to overcome it, and bringing in some outside perspectives on the issue, I think is always certainly useful. I
Hmm.
think the other piece too is bringing in parent education as well.
Yep, that was my next question. That's a great
Saying,
segue.
yeah, parents should be not only educated on the current trends and what they can do, but how can a parent continue with a message that aligns with what the school is looking to teach
Yeah,
about the risks of gambling and addiction. Otherwise, if the messages aren't congruent, then
right.
I think it's not going to stick. So,
So
oh,
speaking of parents, what do parents need to understand about this issue that most of them don't?
I think most parents don't understand how significant
Mm,
the consequences of youth gambling are, and how it's, even if it's just a little $5 bet with dad on the weekend, that is increasing the likelihood that the young person would develop a problem. I think also parents underestimate the influence of social media and how this is also connected with social networks, and it's an integral part of a lot of friendships, especially for young men. And so I think they think, well, it's just kind of in isolation. They don't realize this is an issue with all sorts of young adults. But this actually makes me think of something else I'd wanted to say about what schools should view their attitude, or what they share with students about the
mhm.
issue, is that I'm firmly against the preachy attitude of just, hey, this is evil or whatever.
Yeah,
No, I think it's important to also provide what are some healthy alternatives where you can get the same socialization, get the same sort of enjoyment, and also without promoting to kids how to gamble.
right.
Like, I think it's important to show, well, what are signs of this becoming a problem? Like,
Sure.
how do you
Absolutely.
differentiate internally? Well, I played one $5 hand of poker once a year versus this is something that is slowly eluding my control, I think
Mm,
is important, because I say, if you just go in and say, well, all gambling is evil, whatever, it's bad, I don't know that
right.
that message is going to be taken very seriously. So,
Right. Sure. And so, we've talked about the gamblers. We haven't talked about what they're betting on, the athletes, right? And
oh,
so
yeah,
that's
sure,
a,
sure.
that's a yeah, all sorts of things comes with that, being an athlete. And what I find so crazy now is how mean people are to athletes if they blow their spread or if they lose a game. And like people are attacking both adults and young people because they felt like they lost the money. And so, athletes are certainly of concern, and there's a direct pipeline between we call the sports fandom and the sports betting access and the risk. And so, how do you talk about sports betting with student athletes and coaches and athletic directors? What do they need to know and be thinking
You know,
about?
it's a really relevant point. I recently had a program with Indiana athletic directors for the high school level,
Hmm.
and these athletic directors didn't seem to even understand the depth,
Really?
the magnitude of how serious this is for athletes and coaches. One of the points that I'd picked up on from just a conversation with one of these ADs was, he said, well, I think the thing is, a lot of coaches are actually contributing to these
To
conversations
the problem.
about sports betting and gambling, because it's a way they connect with their athletes. Like, hey, you see the game last night, and then that gives them something to talk about and bond over. So I think that's part of the whole issue is, well, what's the culture in the whole athletic department, and how is that either contributing to the problem or contributing to the solution? And so that's a key piece. I mean, I know there are some initiatives in the NCAA about
Hmm.
aiding young athletes, or even like fans, about harassment in the NCAA, and
Okay.
what the punishment is for someone who's harassing a student athlete or something. So, I mean, I just know, I mean, it's a major issue, right? It's a
Yeah.
major issue that a guy can't miss a free throw without being told that his whole family has to die by next week.
Right.
It's really disturbing. But I don't know that it's especially new stuff. I feel like I've always seen in forums and things that people are very cruel in how they treat athletes.
Yeah. It's crazy. So, as we start to think about wrapping up here, you were once a student sitting in a dorm room at 1 a.m., deep in something no one knew kind of what was happening with you. When you stand in front of a room of young people now, what do you hope they most walk away with?
I think I would hope mostly that students would walk away with the knowledge of healthier choices. I think I would hope that they're empowered to make their own choices and that those choices would be healthier. I
Okay.
think that a lot of young people feel either subconsciously or consciously outmatched by this whole giant industry that's constantly giving them ads and everything. And I think to have a different perspective of, hey, you actually have some agency to choose something better, something else is what I think I'd hope as students can say, hey, you helped me think about this differently. And I'm glad when I get messages like that. Hey, you helped me
Yeah.
rethink my relationship with microtransactions and
Mm.
in-game betting and things like that.
Okay. Wonderful. So, tell us a little bit more about what you do with schools and how you engage, just so that
Sure.
folks know what you're up to.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for
Yeah.
asking. So I do a lot of programming in K through 12 campuses, and what that entails a lot of the time is like a larger group sort of assembly time, but then throughout the day, leading different breakout
Hmm.
workshops, talk in more depth about things like gambling versus investing. How about prediction markets? Let's do a whole segment on that. Meeting with faculty to say, well, how can school faculty be more in tune with what's going on around them? What can you do to amend your handbook? And then speaking to parents usually in the evening. So there's a lot going on. And then I like to send over some additional resources of here's some questions that long list of discussion prompts that you can bring to your advisories for follow-up conversation. And
Wonderful.
there's a document about the modern bookie, things like that, that help,
Not the
continue
bookies
on.
I used to think about when I
I
saw them
mean,
on
not
TV.
always. Yeah, right. The guy with the rusty crowbar that shows up at your office. Not always now, but they're still a threat, and that's. I
Yeah.
know we're wrapping up, but these guys, I've heard stories from kids now that say, well, this bookie would call my football coach and tell him that I owe all this money and I would get kicked off the team. So,
Oh, wow.
even if it's not physical,
Yeah.
and it could be physical, but if it's not, in a lot of these cases, there's still all this anxiety, the pressure. It's like if you hear these sextortion cases
Yeah.
where some kid took their own life from all this pressure from this person they owed money to, well, it's the same sort of deal.
Absolutely. Saul,
Yeah.
this was great. Thank you so much for being here today. And, the courage it takes to tell your story the way you do and to turn into something that protects other young people is awesome. And so
Oh,
really
thank you.
appreciate the work that you're doing and the light that you're shining on this real concern, really. And so grateful for your honesty, your clarity, and the urgency you bring to this conversation. So, folks, if you want to learn more about Saul's work or bring him to your school to visit, you can go to his website, saulmalek.com, and we'll include that link in our show
Sure.
notes. He, I think, will shine a light on what's happening and really be able to connect with the students that you have on your campuses. And so, certainly look for him, reach out to him. And so, folks, also, if you are not already following us on Instagram and TikTok, search for the Dinged Roundtable on both platforms. We'd love to see you there. If you're enjoying the table, please subscribe and share it with a friend or leave us a review. It really helps more people find us. And as always, thanks so much for pulling up a chair at the table today. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about or maybe even something to try in your own community. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time at the table.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table Podcast Series. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We're seeking founding partner schools to be the first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Saul Malek, produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And as always, thanks again for listening.